Welcome. Good morning. How many of you would consider yourselves cosmetic dentists? Raise your hands. A few there. How about aspiring ones? Maybe a few more? Okay. How many of you would like to see an increase in the percentage of cosmetic dental procedures done in your practice over the next few years? A few more hands going up. Great. Based on my experience, the overwhelming reason that holds people back from moving forward with traditional cosmetic procedures like crowns and veneers are two fears. One of those is that patients are more in tune today with what aesthetics means to them. And they're afraid that if they got the work done, that it might look fake, and that would be socially devastating to them. Two, patients nowadays are also more familiar with what traditional tooth preparation looks like for crowns and veneers, and they don't want it. And they're afraid that if they had the work done, that they might have to irreversibly shave down their teeth. And that would be psychologically devastating to them. I would submit that if we as a profession want to continue to offer smile-enhancing procedures for our patients, that we will need to develop a skill set to be able to offer undetectable anterior restorations done in a non-invasive way. And why is that skill set important? Well, let's just have a look at this case as an example. So here we have a case. These are beautiful. They look really realistic. These veneers were done with the Marshall Hanson method. And the beautiful part about this is that if we were to use our X-ray vision and look inside and see the tooth structure underneath those restorations, we would be able to verify that her natural tooth structure is still wholly intact, that there was no volumetric removal of her enamel in order to accomplish the result. And if you were one of those patients who had those two fears that we just discussed, and you just learned that there was a way that you could have a beautiful, natural-looking restoration and that you wouldn't have to sacrifice or grind down your teeth to do it, why would you choose anything else? And maybe instead of a smile enhancement, maybe you just have a front broken tooth, and you had that tooth restored with traditional methods, and that's not aging well, and you're becoming a little concerned about it. And if you knew that you could have that material, that filling material, carefully removed and in a non-invasive way restored in a way that makes it look natural and realistic, and we're going to show you how to do these class 4s here today, so hang in there with me. But why would you choose anything else? The reality is that today, we no longer have to remove enamel in order to enhance smiles. And knowing that, as such, I believe that if we are going to offer elective cosmetic procedures to our patients, that they should be done non-invasively, that we shouldn't be grinding down irreversibly, modifying their natural tooth structure for elective cosmetic procedures, that should be our standard. And that because of this, I believe too that cosmetic dentistry should in time become its own formal specialty in dentistry. Because fading are the days when patients are going to continue to allow us to shave down their teeth for cosmetic elective purposes. This was one of my cases years ago. Here's another case of mine. A young girl came in. She was a little concerned about the aesthetics of her front 4 teeth. So here in the after, I did 4 porcelain veneers. And as I use my X-ray vision now and I look inside and I see what I had to do to her natural teeth in order to accommodate the porcelain, I ask myself, like, was that really worth it? Here's another case. Young girl wanted to enhance her smile. I did 10 porcelain veneers Okay, so we had an improvement. But again, looking and thinking about what I had to do to prepare and modify her natural tooth structure, I felt really heavy about that. I struggled with that, about feeling good about it. Because otherwise these teeth were healthy teeth. Here's another case. This is a gentleman this time, right? He was going to get married. He wanted to enhance his smile. And again, when I think back on the preparation that I understood that I had to do, these were the preparations and the parameters that I had been taught, it still felt heavy for me. And I felt like there had to be a better way, a way that I could still help people feel confident in their smiles without damaging their real teeth. What's desirable about cosmetic dentistry today is not the same as it was years ago. That as awareness is growing about what's possible today, and it is growing, patients will be choosing methods of treatment that are more realistic and much less invasive than ever before. And that's the reality. That's the dilemma that we in our profession are going to be faced with, that we'll either have to learn how to offer non-invasive treatment options for our patients, or we'll have to refer. I'm going to share with you a case that I saw 5 years ago, and it was like my aha case, because it demonstrated to me that I had begun thinking very differently. So here's this case. Imagine it comes into your practice. She's in her late 40s. And she says, "Hey doc, my smile just isn't as nice as it once was. What's the best thing that you can do for me?" And I remember looking at this case and I remember thinking, oh my, had I seen this case just a few years before, I would have planned this case completely different. And what I actually did for this patient, I wouldn't have even thought was possible. Fortunately, I was thinking differently. And what we did for this case, I mean, how are you managing this? We have a canine here, no lateral, a peg lateral on this side, an implant over here, uneven gum lines. How do we manage that case? If I had put myself back early on, just a few years before I saw this case, I probably would have thought, okay, the most ideal thing, if we're going to try to treatment plan this ideally, is remove this implant, get the canine into the right position, create a space here that's right for the lateral, do a new implant in the lateral, do some bone contouring, bone surgery, some gum surgery, and a combination of porcelain crowns and veneers. That's probably what I would have said. But knowing that, this patient in her late 40s probably wouldn't have accepted that. Can you imagine the surgery to remove an implant, place another one, having a gap there for at least a year probably while you try to move that canine back into the right position? And then gum and bone surgeries, recovering from all of that, and then prepping her teeth for crowns and veneers. Again, she might not have accepted that. Fortunately, again, that's not what we did. What we did for her is we started off with some accelerated orthodontics using MOP, which is micro-osteoperforation. It's been in the literature for over a decade, and there's lots of cool stuff about it. I don't have time to get into it because of our time frame. But in just 8 weeks, we were able to get these teeth into a much better position. Again, so far, non-invasively. Now, as we look at this case and we start to imagine things, we're like, okay, maybe there's something that we can do here. And then taking this case and using the Marshall Hanson method, in less than 48 hours, we were able to convert the case from this to this. And the beautiful thing again is that there was no preparation, no removal of her natural tooth structure on any of these teeth to accomplish the result. And here we see the retracted view, the lips, and how those frame her teeth now. And the most important image is this one, and how those teeth fit the proportions of her face. Patients nowadays are looking for this type of option. And again, if they are aware of the possibilities, to be able to enhance their smiles in a non-invasive way in less than 48 hours with materials that can hold up well for decades and look natural, why would they choose anything else? We have to begin thinking differently. If we want our cosmetic dental procedures that we offer our patients to be relevant to them, we have to think differently. We have to think natural looking and non-invasive. Otherwise, we'll be referring to someone else. So, if we're not going to prep teeth, then for the majority of cases, we're going to be doing them direct. That's just the reality. However, the traditional shade selection and layering techniques that have been taught in the past have not been consistently predictable for most dentists. And longevity is a problem. So what do we do? Fortunately, there's a solution. Hi, I'm Dr. Marshall Hanson, developer and educator of the Marshall Hanson method for non-invasive smile enhancement. I believe that there are many people who deeply feel that they could enjoy a higher level of confidence and success in their life if they could just improve the appearance of their smile, but they hesitate to do anything about it because they're fearful that if they did, it might look fake, or that they might have to grind down their teeth to do it. And so they feel stuck, forced to live within the limitations of their insecurity and never feeling fully free to express their best selves within their professional or social spheres. If you're one of those individuals, now there's hope. We've developed a method that allows us to enhance nearly any smile in less than 48 hours without removing any tooth structure, and the results are unbelievably natural looking. The Marshall Hanson method solves the current problems with existing veneer procedures and enables individuals to move forward with treatment, enjoy happier, more positive lives, and feel peace of mind in their decision through this new non-invasive smile-enhancing treatment option. I can't wait for you to request your consultation so we can talk to you again soon. The Marshall Hanson method is a highly systematic approach to smile design that allows us to treat nearly any case in less than 48 hours non-invasively without prepping teeth. It is a method that predictably produces results that are realistic and that are not likely to chip, stain, discolor, or lose their polish over time. It's a methodology comprehensive in its scope, and that I believe has the power to produce a new breed of cosmetic dentists who control nearly every aspect of the case. They would control the functional occlusion. They control the periodontal architecture in the gum line, the macro aesthetics and facial-driven proportions and smile design principles. They control the micro aesthetics, the embrasures, the surface texture, the polish, the translucency. And if they know how everything should look and they control every aspect of it, there's no reason why they can't have an excellent result every time. And that is the predictability that we and our patients are looking for and what MHM can offer to our profession. I want to show you just a few examples of what's possible today without prepping teeth with MHM. So, simple cases, complex gingival architecture cases, implants that were placed way too young, single implant crowns can be restored with MHM, dark teeth, crown replacements, size discrepancies, black triangles, maybe there's an implant in the mix, or an ankylosed tooth and an uneven gum line, wear, recession, black triangles. Maybe the teeth are just a little less visible than we'd like. We want to add some length. We can replace old bonding, which are done in traditional ways. Even complex bite situations. So here in this situation, because we're adding only to the teeth, we can bring them forward and then add the length. And the cool thing about this case here, this is immediately before, immediately after, 2.5 years later. There's no staining, no chipping, no discoloration, no loss of polish. The gum tissue is healthy. And to me, they look better 2.5 years later than they did when I first finished them. Slight alignment discrepancies can be corrected. Diastemas, tooth wear. In this situation here, there were no lateral incisors. These are two canines with some composite on them that we harmonized. Tooth discrepancy. How else do you do this without prepping teeth? You can manage it with this method. Severe wear cases can be treated. Even young adolescents who are born without a lateral incisor and they don't want to have a flipper, we can use this method to create beautiful Maryland-style bridges non-invasively. Severe color discrepancies, color changes, we can replace old veneers. We can treat upper and lower teeth. Check this case out here. Immediately before, immediately after, and 2.5 years later. No chipping, no staining, no loss of polish, no discoloration. The gums are healthy. I think they look even better 2.5 years later than when I first finished them. These are things that are changing the way that we think about what's possible. Significant gummy smiles can be corrected. Old bonding, adolescents, so they just finished their braces and they're self-conscious and they're just starting high school. Most dentists are not going to prep these teeth for veneers on a 14-year-old, but he could have this done because it's non-invasive, it's technically reversible, and it could change his high school experience and his self-confidence. Another young patient just finished braces. He had a central that was underdeveloped. What else could we do for him than this method? Class 4s, we'll talk about those. Diastema, proportion, size changes, boosting someone's confidence. Look at the difference that just adding a little bit of length made for this young lady. Gummy smiles, discoloration, gaps. This patient here, let me go back. This patient here was a dentist. She came in from another country. She had porcelain veneers for many years. She had her dentist, and she went to a really great dentist because she was a dentist and she knew who was good. And the reason why she got veneers in the first place is that she had healthy teeth, they were straight, but she had tetracycline staining. So here, this is the preparation that was done to remove the dark colored tooth structure so that they could do veneers on them. Anyway, she came here with temporaries on the top. We just removed the temporaries. This is what was underneath, and we're able to use this method to replace what she had in porcelain before. This is a paradigm shift. We've been taught that, okay, you could have composite done, but eventually you're going to want to change out that composite for porcelain. With this method, you might be trading out your porcelain for this. So here's a crown in the mix. There's size discrepancies between the laterals and the canines that we can make harmonious. Dark lines above crowns can be corrected with this. Old bonding, size discrepancies, young patients with underdeveloped teeth in their high school years, discoloration, tooth wear. Here's a difficult situation. She has a peg lateral on one side, no lateral, and then a canine in this position. How are we going to manage that and make that look right without prepping teeth? Well, in this method, you can see because we're adding only, we're bringing things out, we can manage the exit angle of the distal of this lateral at a different angle than this one, and we can determine if we want this to be a wide-looking tooth or a narrower-looking tooth by controlling that exit angle on the distal. People that have discolored fillings in between the teeth, and they're concerned about that, general discoloration. An ankylosed tooth and a dark tooth due to trauma can be done and replaced and resurfaced without prepping teeth. Here's another situation, dark tooth. How do we manage that without prepping? Again, because we're adding, you can see where the dark tooth is, how we manage the exit angle. There's enough volume there to hide that dark tooth underneath without prepping. We can replace porcelain veneers with this method, create better harmony and gingival architecture. We can treat young patients, older patients with size discrepancies, creating new harmony in gum and incisal ledges, closing gaps. Even if we're in this case, we just treated the laterals. That's all we did with this method. And you can see how natural and beautiful just treating 2 teeth can be. A canted smile, dark teeth, black triangles. We can even treat lower teeth. Missing teeth, significantly dark teeth, can all be done without prepping teeth. This case right here, she has an implant, some recession, multiple crowns, regular veneer teeth, wear, and can all look very natural. Here's a young girl with a single missing tooth that was an implant. This can be restored on implants and make everything look consistent. What I'm hoping to show you in this brief introduction of MHM is a proof of concept that with this methodology and this approach that we can handle and manage nearly any case, even complex cases, and do it in less than 48 hours with a material that can hold up well for decades, and do it without prepping. As patients become aware of what's possible, why would they choose anything else? So, how does MHM work? Well, there is an online course and a virtual mentorship. There's a 4-week residency program available for dentists who want to learn this method. But because our time is limited here, I want to give you some principles that you can apply next week in your practices. We're going to talk specifically about class 4 restorations because that's something that generally the majority of us will be aware of. But the principles that we apply using MHM for class 4 restorations, those principles are part of a bigger MHM picture. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to go through 4 of some key game-changing protocols that are part of MHM, and then I'll specifically show you how you apply those principles to class 4 restorations so that your class 4 restorations are more natural looking, more predictable, and last longer than before. So MHM and its development grew out of finding solutions to frustrations that I currently was having at the time. And there were 4 things that continued to frustrate me and prove unpredictable when it came to direct composite. One of those was layering for internal natural effects was complex, and it was difficult to get predictable results. 2, that shade matching was just a best guess, but it wasn't always a right on. 3, achieving undetectable, highly polished margins was very time intensive for me. And 4, longevity with composite appeared to be limited. So in our time today, I'm basically going to go over these 3 points because they will all apply to how you can do your class 4 restorations. Achieving undetectable, highly polished margins. This is one of my favorite things and could be a presentation of a few hours on its own. I'll give you just a little bit of that just so that you can have some awareness. But we're going to talk about these principles and then I'll show you specifically how they can apply to your class 4 restorations. Principle number 1, difficulties with layering. So when I was first introduced to layering concepts, and this can apply for a veneer or a class 4 restoration, I was taught that you do this thin palatal shell, and then you do your dentin shades, dentin A3, A2, A1 for transition. Maybe you put some opaque composite over the transition line. You do some enamel, body enamel, some effects enamel, and then an achromatic enamel on the top. This was that layering technique that I had learned about. And it makes sense, right? To build up a tooth in these layers like this. However, for me, the complication came when I started doing more than just one tooth like this. Because as I would go through the process and create the palatal shell, A3, A2, my dentin lobes, maybe some opaque composite, my body enamel, there it is. My effects enamel and my achromatic enamel do the same layers, inevitably I would end up with some layers that were thicker than others on different teeth. And what that would do is as I was starting to finish and shape these, I would start to see an optical difference between them because my layering was just a little bit different. tenths of a millimeter of this layer versus that can make a difference. And then as I'm working on these to make things even worse, right, I start polishing them, and maybe I'm polishing one just a little bit more because there's like this little void there that I want to get rid of. And then after I polish them, I'm like, oh, great. Now I just polished all of my achromatic enamel off of one tooth and not the other. Now I can really tell there's a difference. And I've just spent all this time, I'm starting to sweat, feeling this and the anticipation of showing the patient. And so then it's time, I'm out of time, so I got to show the patient. The patient stands up and graciously he's like, oh, I like what you did, doc, but do you think we could shorten these just a little bit? And so I go in here and I just start shortening those. He's like, yeah, maybe just a little bit more. And I'm thinking, oh, all that halo and those natural effects that I put in, I just lost it all. And then, so the patient's happy, right? And he leaves. And then in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, like I didn't even like those. And now I know all these little fine layers are like right at the edge. And I'm thinking, what's the chance? Like baklava, right? One of those little layers flaking off. And of course, then that happens. You get a phone call and the patient's like, yeah, I got this little chip, doc. Can you fix me and fit me in? So then you're sitting down repairing this and you're thinking, okay, I don't even like these anymore. And now I'm spending more time trying to fix this. Next time I'm just gonna prep the teeth and send it to the lab. Like, that was my experience. And maybe some of you can relate to that as well. Fortunately though, I had a pivotal experience about this time. I was working toward accreditation and fellowship within the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry. And I was doing all my own lab work for this. And so I wanted to improve my ceramic work. And so I wanted to learn how to layer better. So I found a course by Bradley Jones. He's a great ceramist. And what he was doing is he was milling these restorations out in full contour. And then he would do this cutback, this undercutting of the halo area to create room for him to layer in his natural effects. And then he would finish his cases and they would look very consistent and beautiful. So I was like, great, I'll learn that. And so I went to the course and then I came back to implement these principles. Instead of applying them to my ceramics, I started applying them to my direct composite. And so what I started doing is I would just build these up to full contour with a single shade. Then I would have my patient approve them. So now when the patient's like, hey doc, can we shorten these a little bit? No problem. Sure, yeah, let's shorten them. Let's get them right where you want. We can try out the phonetics and the aesthetics and the occlusion. Then once we love those edges and those outline forms, now I can make a measured depth cut into that material, and then I can put in all my natural effects. And instead of layering composites, I can use tints, blue tint, gray tint, ochre tint, which is much more predictable for managing thicknesses and more consistent. Then I can place a little filter composite over top of that, and then a clear layer. What I had done for myself is I had just created a predictable way to put all of my natural effects at the same depth from my final surface. And doing that on multiple teeth became a game changer for me. So here's just a concept in a quick video. I built these all to full contour in a single shade. This is kind of my blank canvas. We've approved them. We like the lengths and the shapes. Now I can do a measured depth cut into that framework, but I keep the incisal edge and the line angles as a reference for my depth and for my reference to build back to, so that my natural effects all end up at the same depth from the surface. So you can see I'm just measuring. I'm doing a cut back here at the halo area. I'm using this larger burr here. And I am just skipping through this because we're gonna go through when we're talking class 4s and talk more about this in detail. But just as an overview, so I basically take a measured depth cut inside of those pencil outlines. And then once I've done that across all the teeth, using the outlines as my reference point, I can now aerobraid, micro etch the composite. I can place adhesive on there and air thin that. Now I can add more composite. I can add my colors. So this is just creating a contrast with my incisal edge that I already approved, so I know we're not going to shorten later. I can create natural effects using gray. I can put blue in the corners like we see on natural teeth. You can already start to see that all these colors are looking consistent throughout the case. And again, I'm just skipping through because we're going to see more of this later. I can use some pink opaque coloring to create some mamelon effects, subsurface. And then once I have all my colors in, I'll just re-wet the surface and I can apply a filter composite that will go over those colors. The filter will just allow like a window, like a frosted window, some of those colors to come through and creates depth. And now I'm putting a clear layer over top of these. And the clear layer will fill in what I had removed in the cutback. And then I can shape, cure, and polish that and then put all my contours in. So this was back in 2015, and I had been working on this cutback concept for a while, and I published this in the Journal of Cosmetic Dentistry. And this is some cases that were just describing the idea. But basically, instead of layering from the ground up, we're creating a full contour, cutting back, and then putting in, at the same depth on all the surfaces, the natural effects, which makes things consistent. And as an example here, I'll just show you. So here in this case, we have a before and after. And what I want you to see in this case is the consistency of the translucency and the depth across all these teeth. I wouldn't have been able to accomplish this at this level with traditional layering techniques on multiple teeth. So again, this became a game changer for me. This was a young client here 4 or 5 years ago. She was getting married. And you can just see the consistency of the depth and the translucency that's there. So, solution to problem number 1, difficulties with layering versus the cutback technique. The cutback technique is more simplified and reproducible than layering from the ground up. It creates a stronger incisal edge, is more predictable at placing the natural effects at a uniform depth from the surface, makes masking out internal color discrepancies easier to manage, allows you to test out and approve all the shapes first, so you get to keep that halo. So, problem number 2, I had difficulties with shade matching. So as an example here, let's imagine that you're in your office and you know that you have 3 anterior restorations to do, and your assistant says, "Hey doc, what shades do you want me to get out for these?" And then you start sweating, right? You're like, I don't know. It's so unpredictable because we have dehydration, we've got maybe 3 different colors of teeth, right? Maybe we can imagine what our tooth preparations might look like, and we can start to imagine the different types of tooth structure that we'd be replacing. But it can quickly get really complicated on what composites do we use so that it becomes undetectable, so you don't see the filling. We don't want to see the filling, and the patient doesn't want to see the filling when it's done. So what do we do? Well, we could use a Vita Classic shade guide, right? We could look at these and be like, okay, so this central is kind of gray, it's a C2. This one's an A2, the cuspid has a higher chroma, A35. So do we pick the 3 different shades for this case, this appointment today? But what about the opacity and the translucency? How are we going to manage that and make that work predictably so that we love it at the end? Well, let's simplify this process. So if we take our Vita Classic shade guide, because most composite systems are based off of something like this, we have our A, B, C's, and D's. Well, let's just get rid of D's, we're simplifying. So we just have A, B, and C. A has a red undertone to it. B's have a yellow undertone, and C's have a gray undertone, okay? So 3 undertones. Let's simplify this even more. If we have a combination of red and yellow, we'll have an orange or an ochre shade, and we have gray. So now we've just simplified this just to 2 tints, 2 colors, right? And what we can basically do with these 2 is we can make any 2 shade that we want on that Vita shade guide. And here's an example of that. We have our blank canvas composite here, and we want to make this half equal a 5M on this shade tab or a 2L on this side. And all we have to do is combine those grays and oranges to make the color that we want. And we just color it what we see. So much more predictable than guessing, right? And really, what's the difference between an A6 composite in your drawer and an A2 composite in your drawer? It's just the amount of tint that's in it. So we can use tints and colors on a blank canvas composite and just color it whatever color we want. So we don't have to have all these different shades. And we can use these 5 shades for any case. This is what I do. 5 colors, use them for any case, whether it's a class 4 or a larger case. We have grays and blues to manage value. We have the ochre that we talked about to manage chroma, and a pink opaque and a white to help us raise value or put in any maverick effects. So here's an example here. We have a filling on an anterior tooth, right? Obviously it doesn't match. No problem. It's not supposed to at this stage. It's just a blank canvas. First thing we're going to do is manage the value. How gray or how white is it? So we look at the tooth, we're like, yeah, the tooth's a lot more gray than this. So we add in some gray color till it matches. And then we're like, okay, so now next is our chroma. So we can add in our filter and some chroma and do some white effects on there that we see on the tooth, and then put our clear layer over top. And we no longer see that restoration. 3 composites, your blank canvas, a filler with some colors that you can manage, and a clear layer. And you can make whatever shade you want. You can easily modify the value and chroma of the material to completely camouflage your restoration and make it undetectable. So, if you're using tints and opaquers, you only need 3 composites. I'm gonna read these to you so you can hear in the back. 1, a blank canvas, a very opaque and strong composite that's brighter than natural teeth. For that, I'm using a Cosmetic B0 Renamel Nano Plus. 2, we need a filter composite, a relatively colorless white composite that's translucent enough to optically filter and blend your natural effects in tints and opaquers. For that, I'm using Tokuyama BL2 Estelit Omega, and a clear layer. This is your final, highly polishable, translucent composite that will, like a window, transmit your underlying effects to the surface. For that, I'm using Cosmetic and Sisalite Renamel Microfill. I'll talk to you later about the chemistry and why it's important to use certain composites versus others. But here's just some examples. Here we just replaced some composites on these 3 teeth using those same 3 composites. We did restore these broken teeth here. Here's that case. This is a single crown replacement using MHM composite. Same 3 composites. This veneer set and this veneer set, same 3 composites. It's just a matter of how much tint that you use and the thickness of those 3 layers of composite that you're using, and you can control it all. So back to our clinical case scenario, we have these 3 preparations. We're going to restore them. So first thing that we'll do is create full contour with our blank canvas composite. We'll now use our colors. So now we've cut back into those colors or into the areas that we've built up. And now we're going to manage it with our tints and colors. We're going to color this what we see. So here we see value first, right? So this is still a little grayer than this. This is brighter. No problem. We'll add some gray in there. So, okay. Now it's starting to match. Now it's starting to blend. And we can do that here in this areas. So then after value, now we do chroma. This little apple core bite here that's out of the tooth, it's not quite as warm as the rest of the tooth, right? So now we can put a little ochre right there, and now it blends. Great. So the rule with the tints and opaquers is we just make everything camouflage before we put our filter on. Then I'll put my filter over it, then my clear layer, and then I can bring these back, polish them up, and surface texture, we can finish those. And here we can see where before we had these preps, we don't see them anymore. And even though we had 3 different substrates, like we had a C shade, A3.5, same 3 composites can work. And these are examples, same situation, large class 4 cases, which we'll talk about more today. Cut back, you color it. This is that result. These front 2 teeth were done in the same way. Frame it with your blank canvas, cut back, color, filter, and clear layer, right? You don't see the lines. It becomes undetectable. Here's my frame, and I'm just gonna zip through this a little bit. So this is that case we were just looking at. I just did the value here first, but now there's just a little bit of chroma. You can see the filling material is just a little bit whiter, not quite as warm, so I put a little dot of ochre to warm it up. Now it looks the same. And then I can put in some pink opaque. I'm just skipping through here. Again, we're gonna see more of this in better detail. So pink opaque for some effects, dentin shades underneath that. Making everything camouflage so we don't see those lines anymore. It all blends. And then once it does, we cure it, and then we'll put in our filter composite. I'm putting in some white effects there. I think maybe, yeah. So then I put my filter over it and then the clear layer. And basically then we don't see the restoration anymore. Same 3 composites, it doesn't matter. If this patient comes in and I have one tooth that's an A3 and one's an A1, I'm just gonna use the same 3 composites and I'll color them the way that I want. This is so much more predictable for me than trying to guess with a shade at the beginning. This was that same patient. She drew this up for me before, where she had these broken teeth. She was sad, low self-esteem, hermit mode, uncomfortable. And then after, happy, confident, motivated, engaged in life again. This is really why we do this, right? It's more than just artwork or restoration of a broken tooth. These are people's lives, and it really matters, right? It really is important. So, summary, difficulty number 2 with shade matching versus tints and opaquers. Tints and opaquers, they're more predictable to paint the colors and effects that you see than guess based on a shade tab. You only need 3 composites for almost any situation. They create a consistent look, even with different colored substrates. You never have to stress again about whether you pick the right shade or not. It's more efficient and full of simplicity. You get to enjoy being creative. So 3, difficulties achieving highly polished margins. We're not going to talk much about this, but I'm just going to briefly show you, if we're doing an MHM veneer on a tooth, we take some mylar, tuck it in, we micro etch it. It leaves this frosted section, but where the tooth has contacts on either side, here and here, the micro etching is not going to touch. That's why we have a black spot. We can measure then our distance. This is our effective margin length from contact point, gingivally to contact point, and then we'll have a measurement. So this one was 14. You'll notice that these custom MHM matrices are specific for central incisors, for canines, and premolars. They're different angles because they're different teeth. They have different CEJ angles. These are anatomically designed to be custom fit. So this is the kit. Now we're going to build this tooth up, and then we take our matrix system, we tuck it in. Let's go. There it is. When this is in place, this creates this beautiful seal against the tooth. It's almost like a single tooth rubber dam in a way. Seals everything. It allows us then to place our etch and our adhesive and our composite in there. When we peel this off, the mylar finish is this glassy, glassy finish. I could never improve that with any rotary instrument. I don't even want to. I don't have to take instruments or 12 blades or discs around the gum line. It's already glassy. It's custom fit for the tooth. We do our cutbacks, our natural effects, and this is that tooth with the MHM using the matrix system. There's so much more to that and what that can do and the possibilities that that makes for another presentation. What about longevity? This was problem number 4. And I think we're all heard and we've talked and we hear in our profession, composites are temporary. They may only last you 3-4 years. That's why it's worth it to prep your tooth down for a porcelain veneer. I'm going to show you that there's a difference in composite chemistries, that it's important that we understand, and many of us haven't heard this before, but it's the truth. There are 2 different classes of composites out on the market. Over 90% of them are a filling material. The chemistry is specifically designed to fill cavities. The other class of composites are designed to be veneering composites. The chemistry is specific for being a very good veneer. And those chemistries are opposite to each other. What makes a really good filling composite, filling material, will make a very poor composite veneering composite. And if we try to use a filling material as a veneer, that's why it will stain, discolor, lose its polish over time, and likely break down. Veneering composites also will make a very poor filling material. And what I'm going to show you here is, this is Cosmedent's Renamel Microfill. It was specifically designed as a veneering composite, not to stain, discolor, lose its polish over time. It's actually contraindicated to use it as a filling material. If you read the instructions, it will say don't use this as a class 2 filling material. The chemistries are different. Not all composites are the same, and that's important to understand. If you're using the appropriate composite veneering material, you can see these are Buddy Mopper's cases, one of the developers of this material, specifically designed for veneering. You can see 2 years, 5 years, 9 years. No staining, no loss of polish, no discoloration, no chipping. I'll answer questions at the end if you have them. You're welcome to do that. 5 years, 19 years later. This was an A2, the time it was placed, still an A2, 19 years later. 26 years later, no loss of polish, no chipping, no staining. 40-year post-op from Buddy Mopper. He would admit that he would have done better with the shapes back then. He was recently out of school using this product 40 years later. Again, no chipping, no staining, no loss of polish over time. This is designed for this. And again, it's different chemistry. This is my own case. So this case of mine on my mother-in-law, at this time, she bit into a broccoli salad and there was a rock in there and she broke her tooth. I had done these veneers like the first year out of dental school. And I happened to use this material one time and I never used it again for like 15 years. And this was the microfill, right? So anyway, it broke, her tooth actually broke, not composite chipping. So I took the composite off, I bonded her tooth back together, then I redid the veneer on it. And I used the same B1 shade that I had used 16 years earlier. And this was the original one and it still matched. So I feel very confident in this composite material, in its color stability, its polish stability. And again, here's the B1 and B1. I had done multiple repairs on other teeth because I was still figuring out occlusion back then. But this one was an original one right here. And this the B1 like 15 years later. So in summary, what are our current options? When we see cases like this, I hope that we begin to think differently. That we don't think that we have to shave down people's teeth for elective cosmetic purposes, that there are techniques and there are chemistries now available to us today that can allow us the possibility, if we develop the skill set, to enhance smiles in a non-invasive way that can hold up well for decades and even do complex cases, control every aspect of the case, and do it without prepping in a non-invasive way. So now we're going to take these principles and we are going to apply those to a class 4 situation. All right, we have just gone through the steps of performing the Marshall Hanson method for non-invasive smile enhancement on a full smile. Now, what if we have a situation where we're only treating 1 or 2 teeth? What then? Well, you'll be happy to know that it is nearly the exact same steps, with a few key concepts to clarify and a few additional considerations to be aware of when applying this method to class 4 situations. We have all experienced frustrations doing class 4 restorations the traditional way. The most common problems are, 1, wondering if we not only pick the right shade combination, but also if we guess correctly on the right amount of volume for the dentin, body, and enamel composites to give us the desired outcome. This part regularly proves unpredictable, and the results are often not quite what we'd hoped for. 2, Seeing that dreaded restorative line where the composite was not quite able to block out completely the original fracture line, and even after all of our careful layering work, it's still noticeable. And 3, even if we got it right, the anticipation of the impending doom that our restoration is going to chip, stain, discolor, or lose its polish over time, and that we will have to be continually offering maintenance solutions to our patients at the most inconvenient times. I once dealt with all of these frustrations regularly, but not anymore. MHM, as a consistent, predictable protocol, has permanently eliminated these frustrations from my practice, even for challenging Class 4 situations. How does this work and why? I'm excited to share this with you because these concepts for Class 4 restorations are game-changing. So let's get to it. We're going to refer now to some simple Class 4 diagrams to review together the key concepts that set this method apart from other traditional techniques. 1. No beveling. When it comes to Class 4 situations, most other techniques promote prepping the tooth to create one or more significant bevels. Traditionally, beveling is taught to create a more gradual transition from the filling material to the tooth so that the finish line is less visible. However, with MHM protocols, we do not need this because we're not planning to leave a finish line in the middle of the tooth. Preparation with this method only involves cleaning the tooth. There is no need to bevel. Beveling weakens the tooth by removing or thinning the outer structure of the tooth and makes the transition area darker and more difficult to blend to. Plus, we embrace a non-invasive philosophy with all MHM techniques and continue to stand by the principle that we do not need to remove enamel in order to enhance a smile, and Class 4s are no exception. 2. Framing sequence. We may not need the MHM gingival matrix. The framing of the teeth is still done one tooth at a time in the same stepwise sequence as you learned in the previous videos, namely, first, palatal incisal, second, proximal if needed, and third, gingival facial. However, there's one exception. We may choose not to use the MHM custom gingival matrix in Class 4 situations if we are happy with the cervical color of the tooth and are not looking to visually bring the tooth labially. 3. Frame to full contour with our blank canvas. Framing to create our blank canvas composite is done only to replace the missing portion of the tooth and is built to full contour. 4. Cut back into the blank canvas. After we approve the function, phonetics, and aesthetics of the restorations and framework, we can now cut back into the blank canvas and prepare to do the natural effects. 5. Tints and opaquers, or colors. As taught previously, there are 2 rules for applying colors. 1. The colors are applied in single dot increments, addressing value first, then chroma. 2. Everything must blend prior to placing the next layer of composite. We cannot rely on the next layer of composite to block out any visual discrepancy that we did not blend and camouflage first with the tints and opaquers. The great thing about this is that you no longer have to worry about picking the right shade of composite. You just color it the way you see it and just visually confirm that it matches before moving to the next step. Note, we may use a pre-treatment photo as a reference while building the incisal character and translucency effects. 6. Filter. Once everything blends, we add the filter. We can then add any subtle highlights desired on top of that filter and again ensure that everything blends prior to the addition of the next layer of composite. Step 7. Clear layer. We generally plan to extend the clear layer apically to about 0.5 millimeter shy of the gum line. Keeping our finish line outside of the central 80% of the tooth will extend the restoration's visual longevity. Number 8. Texture, finish, and polish. It's important to note that in the previous step, our clear layer gets slightly overbuilt, about 0.5 millimeter uniformly across the labial surface, allowing enough volume of material to work with so that all of our anatomy, surface textures, and polish will remain in the clear layer when we're finished. Here is an image illustrating the importance of creating the appropriate level of surface texture for your case. You can see the difference that getting this part right can make. When Class 4 restorations are completed in this way, volume control and color matching are measurable and predictable. The transition at the fracture lines are consistently undetectable, and the material we use is strong, polish stable, and color stable, and will continue to hold up well structurally and aesthetically for decades when done thoughtfully and properly cared for. Now that we have reviewed the basic concepts, let's walk through these steps again on a real tooth example. Here we have a single Class 4 case on a central incisor. You can see from the pre-treatment photo that a large portion of the tooth has been built up with a filling material, and it has begun to discolor and become visibly noticeable to the patient. She reports feeling a bit self-conscious about it in public. We can see that this tooth is slightly more palatally positioned compared to the contralateral incisor, and that the gum line is also more incisal. Our first step is to carefully remove the existing filling material. Again, we are not looking to bevel or remove any volume of her enamel, just get the surface clean. Once the surface has been micro-etched, we can prepare to begin framing the restoration. We will begin with the palatal incisal, using a putty index from our diagnostic wax design. This material is B0 Renamel Nano Plus. We clean up the edges and create smooth proximal pathways for our metal matrix band to build the proximal part of our frame. So here we see the proximal frame is built. This is built with B1 Renamel Microfill Flowable. Now we can use our custom MHM gingival matrix in this case to build the gingival facial aspect of our frame and shape it to achieve our completed full contour frame. This material is A2 Renamel Microfill Flowable for the gingival and B1 Renamel Microfill Flowable for the labial portion of the remaining part of the frame. After approving the outline form, aesthetics, functional occlusion, and phonetics, we are now ready for my favorite part, the cutback and addition of natural effects. The cutback is performed into the blank canvas area of our frame. You can see that the cutback is very smooth and refined. This will make the addition of the colors much more easy to control. The tints and opaquers are applied as taught in the previous videos, and this imbues the translucency and deep internal effects observable in natural teeth. The colors are from Tokuyama and include gray, blue, lavender, ochre, pink opaque, and white. The filter, which is Estelit Omega BL2 from Tokuyama, and the clear layer, which is Incisal-Light Renamel Microfill Flowable, are then added, and now the buildup is brought back to our desired full contour, ready for additional anatomy, surface texture, and polish. And now we have the final product, predictably undetectable and long-lasting. Here are a few other examples of how this MHM technique was applied in slightly different situations. Here is a 2 Class 4 situation, framed and restored with MHM, and another 2 Class 4 situation. Here are 2 lower incisors, framed and restored with MHM. Here's a situation where I only treated 3 teeth with this method. You can see the blue outlines where old fillings were replaced and tooth structure restored. Incisal edge and embrasure changes on 4 teeth in this case. 2 lateral incisor veneers in this one. And here is a different Class 4 case. And a diastema closure retreatment. My intention in showing you a variety of different Class 4 cases is to emphasize how predictable this method can be for you when followed thoughtfully. So we have gone over the concepts and we've seen what kind of results are possible. Now I lastly want to take you through a live case, step by step, and the application of these principles in real time, so you can firmly grasp how this method works and begin to apply it in your own practice.